The sound of glass shattering echoed to the marble foyer of the Williams mansion, followed by 3 distinct voices yelling in perfect synchronization. Dave Williams rubbed his temples as he watched his latest hire, the 7th nanny in 3 months, storm toward the front door with her suitcase already packed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but I simply cannot work under these conditions," Mrs. Natasha huffed, adjusting her crooked glasses. "Those children are absolutely uncontrollable. They put superglue on the toilet seat, filled my purse with mud, and somehow managed to reprogram the house security system to play circus music every time I walked into a room." Dave pulled out his checkbook with practiced resignation. "I'll double your agreed severance pay for the inconvenience." "Triplet," she snapped, not slowing her march toward freedom, "and I'm posting a warning on every nanny website in the tri-state area. Good luck finding anyone desperate enough to take this job. Before we continue, please click on that subscribe button, like this video, and comment which country you're listening from. I'd love to know where you're watching me from. Thank you. Now, buckle up, because this story, it's about to get real." As the door slammed behind her, Dave heard footsteps on the grand staircase. His wife, Beatrice, descended slowly, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the banister. Even at 10 in the morning, she looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, not a hair out of place. Designer dress pressed to perfection. "Another one bites the dust," she asked with mock sympathy, though her tone carried more amusement than concern. "The kids locked her in the panic room for 2 hours yesterday," Dave said wearily. "Security had to override the system to get her out." Beatrice shrugged, examining her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Children will be children. Maybe you're not offering enough money." "I'm offering triple the market rate, Beatrice. The problem isn't the salary." "Then maybe the problem is your expectations," she replied coolly. "These nannies today have no backbone. In my day, we knew how to handle difficult children." Dave bit back his response. In Beatrice's day, she had exactly 0 experience with children until they'd adopted the triplets 5 years ago. Even now, she treated 7-year-old Stephen, Darnell, and Xavier more like house guests and sons. "I have a board meeting in an hour," he said instead. "Can you watch them until I can find someone else?" Beatrice's laugh was sharp. "Darling, I have a spa appointment lunch with the ladies and a charity gala planning committee meeting. My schedule is completely booked." She paused at the door, pulling on white gloves. "Besides, isn't this exactly why we need a nanny? I'm far too busy with important matters to play babysitter." The front door clicked shut with finality, leaving Dave alone with the sound of something crashing upstairs. He closed his eyes and counted to 10, wondering for the 100th time how his life had become this chaotic. 5 years ago, when Beatrice had surprised her with the adoption papers, he'd been overjoyed with 3 beautiful baby boys who needed a home. It had seemed like a miracle. Now, looking back, he wondered if he'd been too caught up in the excitement to ask the right questions. Beatrice had handled all the paperwork, found the agency, even chosen their names. At the time, he'd been grateful for her efficiency. These days, he was beginning to suspect there was more to the story than he'd told him. "Daddy?" Stephen's voice rang out from upstairs, followed by the thundering of 6 feet racing down the marble steps. The triplets appeared at the top of the stairs like 3 tiny tornadoes. Despite being identical, Dave had learned to tell them apart over the years. Stephen was the ringleader, always the first to suggest whatever elaborate prank they'd cooked up. Darnell was a quiet strategist, the one who figured out the logistics of their schemes. Xavier was a performer, the one who could distract adults with his charm while his brothers set their plans in motion. "We're sorry about Mrs. Natasha," Stephen said, though his grin suggested he wasn't particularly remorseful. "Are you?" Dave asked, crossing his arms. "But this is the 7th nanny in 3 months. At this rate, I'm going to have to hire security guards instead of caregivers." "We didn't mean to make her cry," Darnell added quietly. "We just wanted to see if the panic room really worked. And we wanted to know if her wig would stay on if she ran fast enough." Xavier chimed in helpfully. Dave sighed. "Boys, we've talked about this. You can't keep terrorizing every person I hire to take care of you. Why do you act out like this?" The 3 boys exchanged glances, and for a moment Dave saw something vulnerable in their eyes, something that reminded him they were still just children, despite their elaborate pranks and fearless attitudes. They always leave anyway, Stephen said finally, his voice smaller than usual. So why bother being good? The words hit Dave harder than he'd expected. In 5 years, they'd gone through dozens of caregivers. From the children's perspective, every adult in their lives eventually abandoned them, except for him and Beatrice, though her version of staying mostly involved being physically present while emotionally absent. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, kneeling down to their level. "No matter what happens, no matter how many nannies quit, I'm your father and I'm not leaving. Do you understand that?" 3 heads nodded solemnly, and Dave felt his heart squeeze. These boys had been through enough instability in their early lives. Whatever circumstances had led to their adoption, they deserved better than a revolving door of temporary caregivers. "Tell you what," he said, making a decision that would probably give his assistant nightmares. "I'm canceling my meetings today. We're going to spend the whole day together, just the 4 of us. And this weekend, we're going to work together to write a job posting for a new nanny. We'll make a list of what we really need in someone to join our family." "Can we put must-like pranks on the list?" Xavier asked hopefully. "How about must have a sense of humor?" Dave countered. "And must not scream when she finds plastic spiders in her bed," Darnell suggested. "We'll workshop a language," Dave said diplomatically. "Now, who wants to help me make pancakes for breakfast?" The enthusiastic cheers that followed were the first genuinely happy sounds he'd heard in the house in weeks. 3 days later, Dave stood in his study, reviewing applications, while the boys played in the backyard under the watchful eye of Mrs. Brooks, their housekeeper. The new job posting had attracted over 50 responses, which was encouraging. What was less encouraging was that most of the applicants seemed more interested in the Thompson family's wealth than in actually caring for children. "Mr. Thompson?" Mrs. Brooks appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "There's someone here about the nanny position, but she doesn't have an appointment." Dave glanced at his schedule. He blocked out the afternoon for interviews with 3 pre-screened candidates. "Did she say who she was?" "A Miss Monique Williams. She said she saw the posting and wanted to apply in person." Mrs. Brooks hesitated. "She seems different from the others." Intrigued, despite his packed schedule, Dave nodded. "Send her in, but give me 5 minutes to finish reviewing these resumes." Mrs. Brooks disappeared, and Dave tried to focus on the application in front of him. A woman with impeccable credentials and references from some of the wealthiest families in New York City. On paper, she was perfect, but something about her cover letter felt rehearsed, like she'd written the same words 100 times for different jobs. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, not looking up immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt without an appointment. I'm Monique Williams." The voice made him look up sharply. There was something familiar about it, though he couldn't place what. The woman standing in his doorway was striking, but not in the polished, artificial way he'd grown accustomed to in his social circle. She was probably in her late 20s, with natural hair pulled back in a simple bun and kind eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a modest navy dress that had clearly been chosen for practicality rather than fashion, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that immediately set her apart from the nervous energy most job applicants projected. "Please sit down," Monique said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I have to admit, I don't see a resume or application from you in my stack." Monique smiled, and something about the expression tugged at a memory he couldn't quite grasp. "I know this is unconventional, but I wanted to meet you in person first. Sometimes the most important qualifications can be put on paper, such as understanding what children really need," she said simply. "I saw your job posting, and I've heard through the neighborhood network that you've been having trouble finding someone who can connect with your sons." Monique raised an eyebrow. "Neighborhood network? I work for a family a few streets over." "Mrs. Martinez? Her housekeeper is friends with your Mrs. Brooks. Word gets around in our community when good families are struggling to find help." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. Still, her approach was refreshingly honest compared to the carefully rehearsed presentations he'd been enduring all week. "Tell me about your experience with children," he said, settling back in his chair. I've been working with children for 8 years, not always in formal nanny positions, but always with families who needed someone who could see past behavioral problems to the hurt underneath. Hurt? She nodded, her expression growing serious. Children don't act out because they're bad kids, Mr. Thompson. They act out because they're trying to communicate something they don't have words for. Usually it's fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being replaced. The accuracy of her assessment caught him off guard. It was exactly what he'd suspected about his own sons, but had never heard articulated so clearly. You seem to speak from experience, he said carefully. I do. I know what it's like to be a child who's been through trauma, and I know how to help other children work through those feelings in healthy ways instead of destructive ones. Before Dave could respond, the sound of shouting erupted from backyard. Through his study window, he could see Mrs. Brooks chasing the triplets around the pool area while water sprayed in every direction. Excuse me, he said, starting to rise. I should probably, may I? Monique asked, already moving toward the French doors that led to the patio. Dave followed, curious to see how this unexpected applicant would handle his sons in crisis mode. Outside, chaos reigned. The boys had apparently discovered how to reprogram the automatic pool cleaning system, and jets of water were shooting in random directions while Mrs. Brooks tried desperately to reach the control panel. All 3 children were soaked and laughing maniacally as they dodged the water streams. Boys, Dave called out, his voice stern. Turn that off right now. The laughter stopped, but none of them moved toward the controls. Instead, they froze like deer in headlights, clearly trying to figure out how much trouble they were in. Monique stepped forward, and to Dave's surprise, she began to laugh. That, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, is absolutely brilliant engineering. How did you figure out how to reprogram the system? The boys looked at each other uncertainly. They'd clearly been expecting anger, not admiration. Darnell read the manual. Alicia said cautiously. And I figured out which buttons to press, Xavier added. And I distracted Mrs. Brooks so they could work. Alicia finished. Teamwork, I'm impressed. But I bet you could use those same skills to fix the system now, right? Mrs. Brooks looks like she needs a break. Something magical happened. Instead of arguing or running away, the 3 boys actually moved toward the control panel. Darnell's small fingers flew over the buttons while his brothers watched for Mrs. Brooks's reaction. Within 30 seconds, the chaos stopped. Water settled back to normal levels, and the pool area returned to its usual calm state. Thank you, boys, Mrs. Brooks said, wringing out her apron. You're very smart children. We're sorry we made extra work for you, Xavier said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Dave stared in amazement. He'd never heard his sons apologize to staff before. Demand things, ignore them, prank them, yes, but apologize? Never. How did you do that? He asked Monique as they walked back inside. I didn't do anything, she said. I just recognize that they're incredibly intelligent children who are bored and looking for stimulation. Most adults see the chaos and assume they're being malicious, but they're actually being creative. Destructive creativity, Dave said wryly. Exactly. And if you channel that creativity in positive directions, you get positive results instead of destroyed property. They settled back in the study, and Dave found himself genuinely interested in hearing more from this woman who'd accomplished in 5 minutes what 7 nannies hadn't managed in months. Tell me about your background, he said. Where are you from originally? For the first time, Monique hesitated. She said, I grew up here in Atlanta, but I've lived in several different states over the years. Sometimes life takes you places you don't expect. And you came back? Sometimes you have to come full circle to find what you're looking for. It was a cryptic answer, but something in her tone discouraged further questions. Dave had the distinct impression that Monique Williams had secrets, though he couldn't imagine what they might be. Can you start Monday? He heard himself asking. She blinked in surprise. Just like that? Don't you want to check references, run background checks, interview other candidates? I've interviewed dozens of other candidates, Dave said truthfully. Most of them had perfect credentials and impressive references. None of them could get my sons to apologize to Mrs. Brooks after flooding the patio. Monique smiled, And again he felt that strange tug of familiarity. Then, "Yes, Mr. Thompson, I can start Monday." As she left, Dave found himself watching her walk away and wondering why he felt like he'd just made one of the most important decisions of his life. Monday morning arrived with its usual chaos, but this time Dave felt cautiously optimistic. Monique had arrived early, dressed practically in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that somehow made her look both professional and approachable. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said warmly. "Are the boys up yet?" "Unfortunately, yes. They've been awake since 5 a.m., planning what I can only assume is an elaborate welcome prank for you. I tried to talk them out of it, but—" "Oh, I hope they didn't listen to you," Monique interrupted with a grin. "I love a good welcome prank. It shows they're paying attention." Before Dave could respond, the sound of thundering footsteps announced the arrival of the triplets. They burst into the Kit Brooks like a small army, clearly expecting to catch their new nanny off guard. Instead, they found her sitting calmly at the breakfast table with a plate of what appeared to be perfectly normal pancakes. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said formally. "I made breakfast. I hope you're hungry." The boys approached cautiously. In their experience, adults who seemed too calm were usually planning punishment. "What kind of pancakes?" Darnell asked suspiciously. "Try them and see," Monique suggested. Xavier, always the bravest, picked up a fork and took a bite. His eyes widened, and he began laughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. "What's so funny?" Stephen demanded, grabbing his own fork. One bite later, all three boys were giggling uncontrollably. "They're purple," Xavier gasped, "and they taste like bubblegum." Dave looked at Monique in amazement. "How did you—" "Food coloring and bubblegum extract," she said proudly. "I figured if they were planning to prank me, I should return the favor. Fair is fair, right, boys?" "This is the best breakfast ever," Darnell declared, purple syrup dripping from his chin. "Can we have these every morning?" Stephen asked. "Well, special breakfasts are only special if they don't happen every day. But maybe we can have weird breakfast Wednesday once a week. What do you think?" "Yes," all three boys shouted in unison. Dave watched in fascination as his sons, who usually treated breakfast like a military operation requiring strategic food flinging, actually sat still and ate their entire meal. They chattered excitedly with Monique about different flavors they could try, different colors they could make, different shapes they could cut the pancakes into. "I have to go to work," he said reluctantly. "Will you be okay here?" "We'll be fine," Monique assured him. "Won't we, boys?" Three purple-stained grins confirmed her confidence. "Call me if you need anything," Dave said, though for the first time in months, he actually believed he wouldn't get an emergency call before noon. He was right. In fact, he didn't get any calls at all that day. No emergencies, no complaints, no reports of property damage or terrorized staff. By 3 o'clock, he was so curious about what was happening at home that he canceled his last meeting and drove back to the house. What he found defied all his expectations. The triplets were in the backyard, but instead of their usual chaos, they were working together on what appeared to be an elaborate obstacle course. Monique sat on the patio watching them, occasionally calling out suggestions or encouragement. "Darnell, what if you move that hula hoop 3 feet to the left? Xavier, can you reach that rope from there? Stephen, remember what we said about teamwork versus competition?" Dave watched from the kitchen window as his sons collaborated in a way he'd never seen before. They were still energetic, still loud, still completely themselves, but their energy was focused on building something instead of destroying it. "How was your first day?" he asked, stepping onto the patio. Monique looked up with a genuine smile. "Educational. Your sons are remarkable children, Mr. Thompson. They're incredibly intelligent, naturally creative, and they have wonderful hearts. They just needed someone to see those qualities instead of focusing on their behavior problems. What did you do differently?" "I listened to them," she said simply, really listened, not to their words, necessarily, but to what they were trying to communicate underneath the chaos. "And what were they trying to say?" Monique was quiet for a moment, watching the boys argue good-naturedly about the proper height for a rope swing. They were saying they're scared. Scared that everyone who's supposed to care for them eventually leaves. So they test people, push boundaries, create drama, make themselves as difficult as possible. In their minds, if someone's going to leave anyway, it's better to make it happen quickly and get the pain over with. The insight hit Monique like a physical blow. How had he missed something so obvious? How had all those child development experts and experienced nannies missed it? But as he watched her walk away, Monique couldn't shake the feeling that Monique Williams was going to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. 2 months passed in blissful routine. For the first time since the adoption, Monique's household ran smoothly. The boys still had their energetic moments and creative impulses, but under Monique's guidance, their energy was channeled into positive activities instead of destructive pranks. Even more surprising was how much he found himself looking forward to his conversations with Monique. She had insights about everything from child development to business strategy, and she listened with genuine interest when he talked about the challenges of running his company. "You're different from other people in your social circle," she observed one evening. As they watched Darnell practice a magic show they'd planned to perform for the household staff. "Different how? You actually care about people as individuals, not just as assets or obstacles to your goals. That's rare in your world. I considered this. Maybe that's why my marriage is such a disaster." The words slipped out before he could stop them. He'd been thinking them for months, but he'd never said them out loud before. Monique glanced at him with understanding in her eyes. "Is it that bad? We're like strangers living in the same house. We barely speak except about logistics, whose turn it is to attend which charity function, which school events we need to appear together at, what we're doing for holidays. We haven't had an actual conversation in months. Have you tried talking to her about it?" "I've tried. She changes the subject, or she has somewhere else to be, or she acts like I'm being overly emotional for wanting more connection with my own wife." Monique was quiet for a moment, watching Darnell attempt to make a coin disappear, while his brothers provided dramatic commentary. Some people get married for love, and some people get married for other reasons. If you marry for love, and she married for other reasons, it's going to be difficult to find common ground. What other reasons would someone marry for? Security? Status? Access to a lifestyle they want? Sometimes people convince themselves those things are love, especially at first. It was an uncomfortable truth that Dave had been avoiding for years. When he married Beatrice 6 years ago, he thought they were both head over heels in love. Looking back now, he could see signs that she had been more interested in what he could provide than in who he was as a person. "The boys have never really bonded with her," he said thoughtfully. "Hal has assumed it was because they came to us as toddlers, that they were just having trouble adjusting. But watching them with you, what about watching them with me? They trust you completely. They light up when you walk in a room. They come to you for comfort when they're upset. I've never seen them do any of that with Beatrice." "Children are intuitive about who genuinely cares for them," Monique said gently. "They can tell the difference between someone who loves them and someone who's just going through the motions. Is it that obvious? To children, yes. Adults are better at pretending, but children see right through pretense." That night, Dave lay in bed thinking about Monique's words. He and Beatrice hadn't shared a bedroom in over a year, ostensibly because his work schedule meant he came to bed late and woke up early, and she needed her beauty sleep. But the truth was, there was no intimacy left in their relationship, physical or emotional. He'd been telling himself that was normal, that long-term marriages naturally became less passionate. But watching Monique interact with his children, seeing the warmth and genuine affection in her eyes, made him realize how long it had been since anyone in his house had looked at him that way. The next morning brought an unexpected disruption to their routine. Dave was having coffee with Monique before the boys woke up when Beatrice appeared in the Kitburgs, already dressed for the day in an elegant pantsuit. "Good morning," she said coolly, pouring herself coffee from the expensive machine she'd insisted on buying but rarely used. "Morning," Dave replied, surprised. Beatrice usually avoided the Kitburgs in the mornings, preferred to have her coffee and light breakfast served in her sitting room. "Monique, isn't it?" Beatrice addressed the nanny with the polite but distant tone she used with all the household staff. "Yes, madam." "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. I want to discuss the boys' schedule with you. I've enrolled them in additional activities. Piano lessons, tennis instruction, and advanced mathematics tutoring. They'll start next week." Dave looked up sharply. When did you arrange all this? We didn't discuss it. I don't need your permission to provide educational opportunities for the children, Beatrice replied smoothly. They're falling behind their peers in enrichment activities. They're 7 years old, Monique said carefully, and they're already doing very well with their current learning activities. Additional structured time might overwhelm them. Beatrice's smile was sharp. I appreciate your concern, but I think their mother knows what's best for them. Something in the way she emphasized the word mother made Monique flinch slightly. Dave noticed a reaction and felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him. The boys are happy and thriving with their current routine, he said firmly. I'm not changing anything without discussing it with them first. They're children, Dave. They don't get to vote on their education. No, but they get to have input about their lives, and I get to have input about my son's schedules. The temperature in the Kipbrooks seemed to drop several degrees. Beatrice set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. Your sons? She asked quietly. Our sons, Dave corrected, though he wondered why he felt the need to correct something that should have been obvious. Of course. Beatrice's smile didn't reach her eyes. I will be out most of the day. There's a fundraiser planning meeting for the Children's Hospital, then lunch with the Historical Society Board, then dress shopping for the Warrens' anniversary party. Which anniversary party? Dave asked. The one I told you about last week. The one we're attending together this Saturday night. Dave had no memory of this conversation, but that wasn't unusual anymore. Half their communication seemed to consist of Beatrice informing him of social obligations he didn't remember agreeing to. I'll check my calendar, he said diplomatically after Beatrice left. The Kipbrooks felt lighter, though Dave couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Monique was unusually quiet as she prepared breakfast for the boys. Are you okay? He asked. Fine, she said quickly, just thinking about the day ahead. But when the triplets came downstairs to breakfast, chattering excitedly about a new fort design they dreamed up, Dave noticed that Monique's usual warmth seemed forced. She smiled and laughed at the boys as always, but something had changed in her demeanor. It wasn't until that afternoon, when he came home early and found Monique reading to the boys in the living room, that he realized what had been bothering him all day. When Beatrice had called herself the boys' mother, Monique had looked like she'd been slapped. 3 weeks later, Dave made a decision that would change everything. He'd been thinking about his conversation with Monique about marriage, about love versus other motivations. He'd been watching Beatrice more carefully, noticing how she interacted with the boys, politely but distantly, how she talked about their future, in terms of achievements and social standing, rather than happiness, how she treated their marriage like a business partnership, rather than a romantic relationship. That's when Dave decided to test something. It wasn't entirely fair, and it definitely wasn't entirely honest, but he needed to know once and for all what his marriage was really based on. He was going to pretend to lose his fortune and see how Beatrice reacted. The plan required careful coordination with his accountant, his lawyer, and his most trusted business partner. On paper, it would look like a series of catastrophic investments had wiped out most of his wealth. In reality, the money would be carefully moved to protected accounts and trusts that Beatrice didn't have access to. If she truly loved him, she would support him through this crisis and help him rebuild. If she'd married him for money and status, she would cut and run. He hoped desperately that he was wrong about her motivations, but he needed to know for sure. The first part of the plan launched on a Monday morning. Dave's assistant called in a panic, reporting that their largest client had just pulled out a major deal due to irregularities in their financial reporting. By Tuesday, news outlets were reporting on Thompson Industries' potential financial troubles. By Wednesday, Dave's stock portfolio had crashed due to market manipulation by a competitor. Throughout all this manufactured drama, Monique remained completely focused on the boys. She seemed to understand that adult problems shouldn't become children's burdens, and she worked hard to keep their routine stable and their mood positive. Are you okay? She asked quietly on Wednesday evening, after the boys had gone to bed. I know this week has been stressful with all the business troubles. Dave looked at her with surprise and gratitude. Beatrice hadn't asked him how he was feeling even once since the crisis began. In fact, she'd been notably absent, spending even more time than usual at her various social commitments. "I'm managing," he said. "Thank you for asking. And thank you for keeping things normal for the boys. They don't need to worry about adult problems." "Of course not," Monique said firmly. "Children should feel safe and protected, especially during difficult times. That's what families do. The adults handle the stress, so the children can just be children." Her words hit him like a revelation. That's what families do. When had Beatrice ever approached their problems that way? When had she ever tried to protect a boy from adult concerns or support him through business challenges? "Monique, can I ask you something personal?" She tensed slightly, the way she always did when he tried to learn more about her background, but she nodded. "Have you ever been married?" "No," she said quietly. "I came close once, a long time ago, but life took us in different directions. Do you regret it, not marrying him?" Monique was quiet for so long that Dave thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to think I regretted it. I thought about what our life could have been, wonder if things might have been different if I had made other choices. But now," she looked toward the stairs where the boys had disappeared, "now I think everything happens for a reason. If my life had gone differently, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't have met your sons. And they've given me more joy than I ever thought possible." There's something in her tone that made Dave's chest tighten with emotion he couldn't quite identify. The way she talked about his boys, like they were precious gifts rather than obligations, made him realize how much he'd been missing that kind of unconditional love in his own life. "They adore you," he said. "I've never seen them bond with anyone the way they bonded with you." "The feeling is mutual," Monique said with a soft smile. "Those boys have healing hearts. They love so deeply, so completely. They just needed someone to love them back the same way." Healing hearts? Children who have experienced early trauma or loss often love more intensely than other kids. It's like they know how precious love is because they've felt what it's like to be without it. Once they trust someone, they give everything they have. Is that why they've had such trouble with other caregivers? He asked. Partly. But also because they can sense when someone's just going through the motions versus when someone genuinely cares. Children are incredibly perceptive about authentic emotion. Before Dave could respond, they heard the sound of heels clicking across the marble foyer. Beatrice appeared in the Kit Brooks doorway, looking immaculate despite the late hour. "Oh, I didn't realize you were still here, Monique. It's quite late for staff to be lingering, isn't it?" The dismissive tone made Dave's jaw clench. "Monique and I were discussing the boys' needs during this difficult time," he said evenly. "Difficult time?" Beatrice's eyebrows rose. "Oh, you mean your little business troubles. I'm sure it will all work out fine. These things always do in our circle." Her casual dismissal of what appeared to be the potential destruction of everything he'd built was breathtaking in its callousness. "Beatrice, we need to talk," Dave said privately. "Of course, darling." She turned to Monique with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for staying late with the children. You can go now." Monique gathered her things quickly, but not before catching Dave's eye with an expression of concern and support that made his heart skip. After she left, Dave led Beatrice to his study and closed the door. "We need to discuss what's happening with the business," he said. "What's to discuss?" "You'll figure it out, make some deals, call in some favors. You always do. Beatrice, this is different. This could be the end of everything. We might lose the house, the cars, the lifestyle. I need to know that we're in this together." For the first time, Beatrice looked truly focused on what he was saying. "What do you mean, lose everything?" "I mean, we might have to sell this house and move into something much smaller. We might have to let most of the staff go, give up the country club membership, sell the vacation properties. I might have to start over from scratch." Beatrice sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs, her perfect composure finally cracking. "How bad is it really?" "Bad enough that I'm not sure how we're going to pay next month's bills." What happened next would replay in Dave's mind for the rest of his life. Instead of reaching for his hand, instead of offering support or reassurance, instead of saying they'd get through it together, Beatrice stood up and walked to the window. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "What do you mean, think?" About what this means for my future. I can't make decisions when I'm emotional. Emotional? Dave stared at her. Beatrice, this is your marriage, your family. What decisions are there to make except how we're going to support each other through this? She turned to face him, and for the first time in their 6 years of marriage, he saw her completely without pretense. The mask of the devoted wife and mother had slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Dave, I married you because I thought you could provide a certain kind of life for me. If you can't provide that life anymore, then I need to reconsider my options. The words hit him like physical blows. Your options? I'm still young. I'm still attractive. I have social connections and a good reputation. If this marriage can't give me what I need, then maybe it's time to end it before I waste more years. Dave felt like he was looking at a complete stranger. What about love? What about our vows? What about our children? The boys aren't even mine, Beatrice said with shocking coldness. I never wanted to adopt them in the first place. That was your idea. That was not my idea, Dave exploded. You brought me the adoption papers. You said you found 3 babies who needed a home. I said what you wanted to hear. She replied calmly. You were so desperate for children, and I thought having a ready-made family would be easier than actually getting pregnant and dealing with babies. But they've been nothing but work and expense and social complications. Dave stared at her in horror. Social complications? Do you know how exhausting it is to explain their behavior at school events? To make excuses for why they can't sit still during charity functions? To pretend I'm a devoted mother when I never wanted children in the first place? Then why? Dave asked desperately, why did you bring them into our lives if you never wanted them? Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, and something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Because I thought it would make you happy, she said finally, and I thought happy husbands were more generous with their wives. The admission hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Everything Dave had believed about his marriage, his family, his life, crumbled in that moment. Get out, he said quietly. Dave, get out of this room. Get out of this house. I can't look at you right now. Don't be dramatic. Get out. Beatrice flinched at the volume of his voice, then straightened her shoulders and walked toward the door with dignity that was completely at odds with what she'd just revealed. I'll be staying at my sister's while you calm down and think rationally, she said. When you're ready to discuss this like adults, you know where to find me. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Dave alone with the wreckage of everything he thought he knew about his life. The next morning brought the final blow. Dave was in the bush with Monique and the boys, trying to pretend everything was normal when his lawyer called. Dave, I'm sorry to bother you so early, but we have a situation. Beatrice's attorney just delivered divorce papers to my office. The phone nearly slipped from Dave's numb fingers. What? She's filing for divorce. And Dave? There's something else. She's waiving all claims to marital assets, and she's relinquishing all parental rights to the boys. She's essentially walking away from everything. Dave looked across the bush where his sons were eating breakfast, chattering happily with Monique about their plans for the day. They had no idea that the woman they called mother for 5 years had just legally abandoned them. There's a restraining order, too. His lawyer continued. She's claiming she feels unsafe and demanding that you and the children have no contact with her. She feels unsafe? Dave asked incredulously. I know it doesn't make sense, but it gets worse. She's also filing for an emergency injunction to freeze your accounts, claiming you might try to hide assets or leave the jurisdiction. The irony was almost laughable. Beatrice was trying to freeze accounts that were already frozen as part of Dave's fake financial crisis. She had no idea that the money she was trying to protect had already been moved to keep it safe from exactly this kind of legal maneuvering. Handle it, Dave said wearily. Do whatever you need to do. After he hung up, Monique appeared at his elbow with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. Bad news? She asked quietly. Beatrice is filing for divorce, and she's also giving up all rights to the boys. Monique's face went pale. She's abandoning them? Completely. And she got a restraining order, so they can't even say goodbye. Oh, those poor babies, Monique whispered, looking toward the triplets who were still obliviously happy. How are you going to tell them? I have no idea, I admitted. They've lost so much already in their short lives. How do I explain that another mother figure is walking away? Very carefully, Monique said softly, and with a lot of love and reassurance that you're not going anywhere. What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing and traumatize them even more? You won't, Monique said with quiet confidence. You love them. That's the most important thing. Children can handle almost any truth if they know they're loved and safe. Will you help me? He asked impulsively. When I talk to them, they trust you, and I think they might need to hear from someone they know isn't going to leave them to... Of course, she said without hesitation. We'll get through this together. All of us. That afternoon, Dave sat down with his sons in the living room with Monique by his side. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say a dozen times, but when he looked into their innocent faces, all his prepared words disappeared. Boys, I need to tell you something important about Beatrice. Is Mama sick? Stephen asked with immediate concern. Nobody. She's not sick, but she's decided that she needs to live somewhere else now. She won't be coming back to this house. Ever? Zachary's voice was small. No, sweetheart, not ever. Did we do something wrong? Darnell asked, and the question broke Dave's heart. Absolutely not, he said firmly, pulling all three boys closer to him on the couch. This has nothing to do with anything you did. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense to anyone else, especially children. But I need you to understand that this is about Beatrice's choices, not about you. But they were our mom, Stephen said, tears starting to fall. I know, baby. I know this hurts. Is she gonna come back when you're not broke anymore? Zachary asked. Dave exchanged glances with Monique. His sons were more aware of the business troubles than he'd realized. No, he said gently. She's not coming back. And that's actually okay because we're going to be fine, just the four of us. What if you decide to leave too? Darnell whispered. Never, Dave said fiercely. I will never leave you, ever, no matter what happens with money or houses or anything else. I am your father, and I will always be your father. Do you understand me? Three heads nodded against his chest, but he could feel their small bodies shaking with silent sobs. It's okay to be sad, Monique said softly. It's okay to be angry or confused, too. When someone leaves your family, it hurts. But you know what doesn't change? What? Zachary asked through his tears. How much your dad loves you. How much I care about you. How much Mrs. Brooks and all the people who really know you think you're amazing kids. The people who truly love you don't leave just because things get hard. Are you going to leave? Stephen asked her directly. No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere, either. Promise? I promise. That evening, after the boys had finally cried themselves to sleep, Dave found himself alone with Monique in the bush again. The events of the past few days felt surreal, like someone else's life was about to end. I can't pay you, he said suddenly. I mean, I can pay you for this week, but after that, I'm not sure when I'll be able to afford a nanny again. Monique looked at him with surprise. Do you think I care about the money? You have to care about money. Everyone has to eat, pay rent, live. Those boys just lost another mother figure. She said quietly. Do you really think I'm going to abandon them now because of a paycheck? Monique, you can't work for free. That's not fair to you. Then don't think of it as work. She said simply, think of it as family helping family. Family? Maybe not by blood or law, but by choice. Those children have claimed my heart, Monique, and I've claimed theirs. That makes us family in every way that matters. Monique felt his eyes fill with tears for the first time since this whole nightmare began. I don't deserve you. The boys don't deserve you. You're too good for this mess. Hey, Monique said firmly, moving closer to him. You don't dare think that way. You're a wonderful father who's going through a terrible time. The boys are amazing kids who've been hurt by adults they trusted. None of you deserve anything but love and support. Why? He asked desperately. Why are you willing to stay when everyone else leaves? Monique was quiet for a long moment, and Dave could see her struggling with something internal. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything and have no one to catch you when you fall, she said finally. And I know what it feels like to love someone and have them taken away from you. I can't fix what happens to me, but I can make sure those boys never feel that kind of abandonment again." As her words settled between them, Dave realized that something fundamental had shifted in his feelings towards Monique. She was no longer just his employee, or even just a friend. She was becoming something much more important, someone he couldn't imagine living without. The thought should have scared him. He was in the middle of a divorce, dealing with fake financial ruin, and trying to help his sons process abandonment by their adopted mother. The last thing he needed was romantic complications. But as he looked into Monique's kind, determined eyes, Dave realized that what he felt for her wasn't a complication at all. It was the first thing that had felt completely right in years. 2 weeks later, Dave made another decision that changed everything. He decided to come clean about the fake financial crisis. The divorce proceedings were moving forward rapidly. Beatrice had made it clear through her lawyers that she wanted nothing from the marriage except her freedom, and she wanted it as quickly as possible. She'd already moved in with a new boyfriend. Apparently, she'd been seeing someone else for months before she left. The boys were adjusting better than Dave had expected, largely thanks to Monique's patient support and the stability she provided. They still had sad moments and asked difficult questions, but they were resilient kids who were learning to trust that the people who truly loved them wouldn't disappear. But Dave was tired of pretending to be broke, especially since it meant Monique was working without pay and he couldn't properly provide for his son's future. More than that, he was tired of living a lie with someone who becomes so important to him. "I need to tell you something," he said to Monique one evening after the boys were in bed. She looked up from the story she'd been writing for them, a tale about 3 brave princes who went on adventures together, and gave him her full attention. "The business troubles," he began awkwardly. "They're not real." Monique blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not actually broke. I staged the whole thing to test Beatrice's reaction. I want to know if she loved me or just my money." Monique set down her pen and stared at him. "You pretended to lose your fortune?" "Yes. And before you ask, yes, I know how manipulative and dishonest that was. But I needed to know the truth about my marriage. And now you do." "Now I do," he confirmed. "She showed me exactly who she was the moment she thought the money was gone." Monique was quiet for a long time, and Dave couldn't read her expression. He'd expected surprise, maybe disapproval of his methods, possibly relief that he wasn't actually facing financial ruin. He hadn't expected the look of hurt that crossed her face. "What's wrong?" he asked quickly. "Nothing," she said quickly, but he could tell she was upset. "Monique, please talk to me. It's just..." She took a deep breath. "I told you I would stay even without pay. I meant that, but now I'm wondering if this was a test of me too." The accusation hit him like a slap. "No, absolutely not. I never meant..." "Didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Even a little bit? Weren't you curious to see if I would stick around when things got tough?" "Maybe," he admitted reluctantly. "Maybe some small part of me was. But that wasn't the main reason, I swear. And you passed every test with flying colors." "I wasn't trying to pass a test, Dave. I was trying to take care of people I love." The word love hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them were quite ready to address directly. "I know," he said softly, "and I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth sooner. I should have trusted you with it from the beginning." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was scared. Scared that if you knew I wasn't really in crisis, you might leave. Scared that maybe you were only staying out of pity or ovulation. And now I know better. You're here because you choose to be here. Because you love my boys and because..." He paused, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Because I love you too," Dave said quietly. The word stopped Dave's heart. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, meeting his eyes directly. "Not your money, not your house, not your status. You, the man who puts his children first, who agonizes over every decision that might affect them, who would rather face financial ruin than live a lie." "Monique," she rushed on, "I know the timing is terrible. I know you're getting divorced and dealing with custody issues and trying to help the boys process everything. I know this complicates everything. But I couldn't let you apologize for testing me without understanding that you never needed to test me. I was already yours." Dave stood up slowly, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. This incredible woman, who'd save his children, who'd shown him what real love looked like, who stayed when everyone else left, was telling him how she loved him. "I love you, too," he said, crossing the room to where she sat. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you turned my son's chaos into creativity. I just didn't know how to handle it." And now, instead of answering with words, Dave leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded with equal feeling. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Now I want to do this right. I want to court you properly. Introduce you to people as the woman I love, not just a boy's nanny. I want to build a real life with you. What about the divorce? What about the boys adjusting? The divorce will be final in a few weeks." As for the boys, Dave smiled. "I think they're going to be thrilled. They already love you more than anyone else in the world." "And I love them," Monique said softly. "They feel like my own children." "They are your own children," Dave said firmly. "In every way that matters. They're ours." As he said the words, Dave realized they felt completely natural. This woman had been more of a mother to his boys in 6 months than Beatrice had been in 5 years. She was already their family. Now it was just time to make it official. 3 months later, Dave's divorce was final, and he was ready to start the next chapter of his life. He'd been planning the perfect proposal for weeks, wanting it to be special not just for him and Monique, but for the boys who would gain a real mother when she said yes. The plan was elaborate, but heartfelt. The boys were in on it, of course. They'd helped design every detail, and could barely contain their excitement. They'd set up a treasure hunt in the backyard with clues that led to meaningful spots around the property. Each location had a note about something Monique had brought to their lives: joy, stability, love, laughter, security, hope. The final clue led to gazebo by the pool, where Dave waited with a ring and 3 boys who were practically vibrating with anticipation. "Monique," Xavier called when she emerged from the house with the final clue in hand. "Come see what we found." She approached the gazebo with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The boys had been acting strangely all day, whispering amongst themselves and giggling at random moments. What she found took her breath away. Fairy lights had been strung around the entire structure, and flowers were arranged in every color of the rainbow. A banner stretched across the entrance, reading "Our Family" in the boys' careful handwriting. And in the center of it all, Dave stood in his best suit, holding a small velvet box. "Monique Williams," he said formally, "you came into our lives when we needed you most. You took 3 scared, angry little boys and showed them how to trust again. You took a broken man and taught him what real love looks like. Monique," she whispered, tears already starting to fall, "you didn't just accept us as we were. You helped us become better versions of ourselves. You turned a house into a home, strangers into a family, chaos into joy." He dropped to one knee, and the boys moved to stand beside him in a formation they'd clearly rehearsed. "We want to ask you something," Stephen announced importantly. "Will you marry our dad?" Darnell added. "And be our real mom forever?" Xavier finished. Dave opened the ring box, revealing a beautiful but understated solitaire that somehow seemed perfect for Monique's practical, elegant style. What they said, he said with a grin that was part nerves, part pure happiness. "Monique, will you marry me? Will you make our family official?" Monique looked around at the 4 faces staring at her with hope and love and barely contained excitement. These males had become her whole world, without her even realizing it. The thought of spending the rest of her life with them wasn't just appealing. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." The boys erupted in cheers while Dave slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. Then she was in his arms, and they were kissing while the triplets danced around them, chanting, "We're getting a mom. We're getting a mom." It was perfect. It was everything Dave had dreamed of and more than he'd dare hope for, which made what happened next even more shocking. They were still celebrating, still caught up in the joy of the moment, when Mrs. Brooks appeared at the edge of the garden looking flustered and concerned. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone at the front door. She says she's Mrs. Thompson, and she needs to speak with you immediately." Dave's blood ran cold. That's impossible. The divorce was final. She has a restraining order that prevents her from coming here. She seems very upset, sir. She's crying and saying something about making a terrible mistake." Dave looked at Monique, who'd gone pale beside him. The boys had stopped celebrating and were looking confused and worried. "Take the boys inside," he told Monique quietly. "I'll handle this." "No," she said firmly. "We're family now. Whatever this is, we face it together." "Monique, together," she repeated. Dave nodded, taking her hand. "Boys, stay close to us, okay? And remember what we've talked about. Sometimes adults make bad choices and then try to fix them, but that doesn't mean the people who love you are going to change their minds about loving you." They walked in front of the house as a group, and what they found was almost unrecognizable as a composed, elegant woman who had left 3 months earlier. Beatrice stood on the front porch looking haggard and desperate. Her usually perfect hair was unkempt. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and her expensive clothes looked like she'd been wearing them for days. "Beatrice, Dave, thank God," she said when she saw them. "I need to talk to you, alone. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my family." Dave replied coolly. "Your family?" Beatrice's eyes darted to Dave's left hand and the ring that sparkled there. "You're engaged? Already? In 3 months? To a lowlife? What a joke. What do you want, Beatrice?" "I want to come home," she said desperately. "I want to fix this. I made a terrible mistake, and I want to make it right." "You signed divorce papers," Dave pointed out. "You relinquished parental rights. You got a restraining order. You made your feelings about this family very clear. I was scared. I thought you were really broke, and I panicked. But I know now that money doesn't matter. What matters is love and family, and—" "Stop," Dave said firmly. "Just stop. You had your chance to choose love and family. You chose to walk away. But I'm choosing differently now. I want to be a better wife, a better mother. I want us to be a real family. We are a real family," Stephen said suddenly, stepping forward. "And you're not part of it anymore." Beatrice was stricken. "Stephen, sweetie, I know you're angry with me, but we're not angry," Darnell interrupted. "We're happy. Happier than we ever were when you lived here. You never loved us anyway," Xavier added with devastating honesty. "Monique loves us. She stays when things are hard. She doesn't leave. I didn't mean to leave. I just needed time to think." "You needed time to think about whether you wanted to be our mother." Monique spoke for the first time, her voice quiet, but carrying clearly. "What kind of mother needs to think about that?" "You don't understand," Beatrice said desperately. "You don't know what it's like to—" "I know exactly what it's like." Monique stepped forward. "I know what it's like to love children so much that you'd do anything to protect them. I know what it's like to put their needs before your own comfort, their happiness before your convenience. I know what it's like to stay when things get difficult, because that's what love means." Something in Monique's tone made Beatrice take a step back. For the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed to really look at the other woman, really see her. "Who are you?" she asked slowly. "I'm the woman who loves your ex-husband and his children. I'm the person who was here when you chose not to be." "No," Beatrice said, shaking her head. "You do know who I know you from somewhere. Your voice, your face." "Oh, my God!" The color drained from Beatrice's already pale face as recognition dawned. "You're her. You're the girl from high school. Monique's girlfriend. The one I asked to disappear. So you changed your name legally? You went that far to the extent of changing your name Eliza?" Monique felt the world tilt around him. "What are you talking about? So you were Eliza and you changed all your names." But even as he asked the question, pieces were falling into place in his mind. The familiar voice he'd noticed on their first meeting. The way she'd seemed to understand his son so intuitively. The pain in her eyes when she talked about losing someone she loved. "Eliza and now Monique?" he said uncertainly. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with tears and a lifetime of stored pain. "Hello, Monique," she said softly. "It's me. It's really me. This is impossible," he breathed. "You moved away. You disappeared. I tried to find you, but—" "I didn't move away," Monique said quietly. "I was forced away." "By who?" Monique's eyes moved to Beatrice, who was backing toward her car with growing panic. "By her," she said simply. The revelation hit Dave like a physical blow. His high school sweetheart, the girl he planned to marry, who was pregnant for him, the love of his life who had vanished without explanation, was standing in front of him, had been caring for his children for months, had just agreed to marry him, and somehow Beatrice was involved in why she disappeared all those years ago. "Beatrice," he said, voices dangerously quiet, "what did you do?" But Beatrice was already in her car, starting the engine with shaking hands. "Wait," Dave called, starting toward the driveway, but she was already backing out, tires squealing as she fled. Dave turned back to Monique, his mind reeling with questions and implications he was only beginning to process. "The boys," Monique said urgently, "they don't need to hear this right now." She was right. The triplets were standing there looking confused and worried, trying to understand what had just happened. "Mrs. Brooks," Dave called, "could you take the boys inside and get them some ice cream? We need a few minutes to talk." "Of course, sir. Come on, boys. Let's celebrate your new mama with triple scoops." After they were gone, Dave and Monique stood alone on the front porch, the fairy lights from their engagement celebration still twinkling in the garden behind them. "Tell me," Dave said simply. And Monique did. She told him. She told him about the night before graduation, when Beatrice and two of her friends had cornered her in the school parking lot. How Beatrice had told her that she would never be good enough for Dave, that she was dragging him down, that if she really loved him, she'd let him go so he could have a successful life he deserved. She told him about the threats, how Beatrice had said that she'd ruin his college prospects, destroy his family's business relationships, make sure he was blacklisted from every opportunity he'd worked so hard for. She told him about finding out she was pregnant just days later, about going to clinic to confirm it, and discovering that Beatrice worked there part-time, about Beatrice's shocked face when she saw the test results and the cold calculation that had followed. She told him about the escalated threats, how Beatrice had said she'd make sure Monique lost her job, her apartment, any chance of supporting a child, how she'd promised to destroy not just Dave's future, but Monique's as well, if she didn't disappear completely. I was 18 and terrified, Monique said, tears streaming down her face. I had no family, no support system. She convinced me that staying would ruin both our lives, that the baby would grow up in poverty and shame while you lost everything you'd worked for. Monique listened in growing horror as she described packing her few belongings in the middle of the night and taking a bus to a city where she knew no one, how she worked double shifts at a diner while pregnant, saving every penny for the baby that was coming. I was going to tell you, she said desperately. After the baby was born, when I was stable enough to support us both, I was going to come back and explain everything. I was going to ask if you could forgive me for leaving, if there was still a chance for us to be a family. What happened? Dave asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. I went into labor early. Complications. The doctor said. She took a shaky breath. They said all 3 babies were too premature to survive. Triplets. 3 tiny boys who never got to take their first breaths. Dave's heart stopped. 3 boys? They were so small, so perfect. I held them for a few minutes each, said goodbye, and then she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The hospital said they'd handle the arrangements. I was alone. I had no money for funerals, so I trusted them to do what was right. Monique. Dave could barely speak around a growing certainty in his chest. I was staying in that city for 8 years. I couldn't bear to come back here, couldn't face the memories. I convinced myself that leaving had been the right choice, that you were better off without me. But I never stopped loving you, and I never stopped grieving for the children we'd never get to raise together. Why did you come back? Because I was tired of running, tired of hiding. I wanted to see you one more time, see what kind of life you'd built, see if you were happy. I saw the nanny job posting and thought, she laughed bitterly, I thought I could be near you for just a little while, without you knowing who I was. I thought maybe taking care of other children would help heal the part of my heart that never got over losing our babies. Dave reached for her hands, his own shaking. Monique, what were the dates? When were your boys born? July 15th, 8 years ago. Why? The blood drained from Dave's face. That's Stephen, Darnell, and Xavier's birthday. July 15th. Monique stared at him. That's impossible. My babies died. I was told they died. What hospital were you at? St. Mary's downtown. But Dave, I don't understand. Beatrice worked at St. Mary's. Dave said slowly, pieces of an unthinkable puzzle clicking into place. She brought me adoption papers for 3 premature boys who needed a home. 3 boys born on July 15th, 8 years ago. The words hung between them like a bridge spanning an impossible chasm. You're saying Monique couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying those boys upstairs aren't just the children of my heart. They're the children of our bodies. Our sons. The babies you thought you lost. Monique collapsed onto the porch steps, her entire world reshaping itself around this revelation. She stole them. She stole our children and lied to both of us. He told me they were orphans who needed a home. She handled all the paperwork, all the legal proceedings. I never questioned it because I was so grateful to finally have children. And she told me they died, so I wouldn't look for them. She let me grieve for 8 years while she played mother to my own sons. Dave sat down beside her on the steps, both of them trying to process the magnitude of what they discovered. Inside the house, they could hear the boys laughing with Mrs. Brooks, completely unaware that their world had just shifted on its axis again. What do we do now? Monique asked finally. We call the police. Dave said grimly. What Beatrice did was kidnapping, fraud, false documentation. She's going to prison for this. What about the boys? How do we tell them that everything they thought they knew about their origins was a lie? Dave considered this. Maybe we don't tell them everything at once. They've been through enough upheaval this year. We can tell them that we discover we're their biological parents, that they were never really adopted after all. We can save the details about Beatrice's crimes until they're older and better able to process it. They're going to have questions. They're going to have questions anyway. At least now we can give them honest answers about where they came from, why they're the way they are. He took her hand, his own shaking. At least now we can tell them that they were wanted and loved from the very beginning, even when we didn't know where they were. I can't believe they're really ours, Monique said, tears flowing again. I can't believe I've been taking care of my own children without knowing it. Maybe some part of you did know, Dave suggested. Maybe that's why you bonded with them so instantly, why they trusted you so completely. Maybe love recognizes love even when our minds can't make the connection. Before Monique could respond, the front door opened and 3 curious faces peered out. Are you guys okay? Mrs. Brooks said you need to talk about grown-up stuff, but you've been out here forever. We're better than okay, Dave said, standing and pulling Monique up with him. We're perfect. Come here, boys. We have something wonderful to tell you. The triplets approached cautiously, still unsure about what they'd witnessed with Beatrice's unexpected visit. You know how we've always told you that families are made by love, not just by blood? Dave began. 3 heads nodded. Well, it turns out that sometimes the universe has an even better plan than we realized. Sometimes families are made by both love and blood, Monique added, her voice full of wonder. What do you mean? Darnell asked. We mean that Monique isn't just going to be your new mom. She's your real mom, your biological mother. And I'm not just your adoptive father. I'm your biological father, too. The boys stared at them in confused silence. But how is that possible? Xavier asked finally. It's a long story that we'll tell you when you're older, Monique said gently. But the important thing is that you were never really adopted at all. You were always our children. We just didn't know how to find each other until now. So we're a real family? Like a born family? Not just a chosen family? You're both, Monique said firmly. You're our biological children, which means you got your intelligence from your mom and your stubborn streak from me. The boys giggled at this. But you're also our chosen family, because every single day we choose to love you, to take care of you, and to be proud of who you are. Does this mean Beatrice was lying about being our mom? Darnell asked with the devastating perception of childhood. Dave and Monique exchanged glances. There was no point in protecting Beatrice now. Yes, Monique said simply. She was lying about a lot of things. But that's her problem to deal with, not yours. Good, Xavier said decisively. "I like our real family better anyway." "Me too," Stephen agreed. "Can we go have that ice cream now?" All this talking about families makes me hungry. As the boys raced back towards the kitchen, Dave and Monique followed more slowly, still processing everything that had changed in the span of an hour. "Are we going to be okay?" Monique asked quietly. "We're going to be better than okay," Dave said with growing confidence. "We're going to be what we always should have been, a real family built on truth and love, and the kind of bond that can't be broken by lies or time or distance." Even with everything that's coming, the legal battles, the media attention when this story comes out, especially with all that, Dave said firmly, we survived 8 years apart. We survived believing we'd lost each other forever. We survived thinking our children were dead, and they survived thinking they were unwanted orphans. If we can survive all that, we can survive anything together. 2 weeks later, Beatrice was arrested on charges of kidnapping, fraud, falsifying legal documents, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming once investigators started digging into the adoption paperwork and hospital records. It turned out that Beatrice had orchestrated the entire scheme with the help of 2 accomplices, a corrupt hospital administrator and a lawyer who specialized in questionable adoptions. They told Monique her babies had died while simultaneously arranging for Dave to adopt them through falsified paperwork. The story made national headlines. Billionaire discovers wife stole his own children. The media frenzy was intense but brief, and the Thompson family weathered it by staying focused on what mattered most, healing and moving forward together. The boys handled the revelations better than anyone expected. Children are remarkably adaptable, and the truth actually answered questions they've been carrying unconsciously for years. They look like their parents now, because they were their parents. They felt so connected to Monique, because she was their biological mother. The love they'd felt was real, because the bonds were real. 6 months after Beatrice's arrest, on a beautiful spring morning, Dave and Monique were married in the same garden where he'd proposed. The story that had started with chaos and deception and broken hearts had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of love to overcome any obstacle, to heal any wound, to bring together what was meant to be together. Dave Thompson had started the year thinking he had everything: wealth, success, a family. He discovered that what he actually had was built on lies and pretense and obligations. But in losing what he thought he wanted, he'd found what he'd actually needed all along: genuine love, real partnership, and the family he'd been meant to have from the very beginning. Sometimes the best stories were the ones where everything fell apart before it had come together properly. Sometimes you had to lose everything to discover what really mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very patient, love really could conquer all. The Thompson family had learned all of these lessons the hard way, but they'd learned them together, and they'd emerged from their trials stronger, happier, and more grateful than they'd ever imagined possible. Their story had started with 3 boys who couldn't keep a nanny. It had ended with 3 boys who'd found their way back to the parents who'd never stopped loving them, even when they didn't know where they were. It was a kind of ending that proved miracles really could happen, love really could last, and families really were forever, no matter how long and winding the path to get there might be. As for Beatrice, she received a 15-year prison sentence for her crimes. Her co-conspirators received similar sentences, and the corrupt adoption network they'd been running was completely dismantled. She never tried to contact the Thompson family again. Perhaps she finally understood that some crimes were too great for forgiveness, some lies too devastating for redemption. But that was her story to live with, not theirs. The Thompsons were too busy living their happily ever after to worry about the woman who nearly destroyed it before it could begin. They were home, they were whole, they were happy, and they were finally, truly, completely together, forever. Before you go, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with your loved ones. We post videos every single day on this channel, so it's a good thing if you check out other videos here, too. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and opinions on this story. We'll see you in the next story. Bye.